Captain Kim Day stretched his arms and looked out at the endless stars through the bridge window. 300 years of living, and space still amazed him every single day. His body looked like he was 30, thanks to the miracle of quantum, cellular regeneration. But his eyes held centuries of wonder and experience. Another boring Tuesday in the year 2387, he muttered with a grin, knowing that in his line of work, boring days rarely stayed boring for long. The exploration ship, Persistence, hummed quietly as it drifted through the Kepler 442 system. Kim Day's crew had been mapping this region for 2 months now, cataloging planets and taking notes on anything interesting they found. It was routine work, but Kim Day loved routine work. After living for centuries, he'd learned that the best adventures usually started on the most ordinary days. "Captain, you need to see this," called out Park Ji-won from her navigation station. She'd been with the crew for over 50 years, and Kim Day trusted her instincts completely. When Ji-won said something was worth looking at, it usually was. Kim Day walked over to her station, his coffee mug in hand. The hot liquid inside had gone cold hours ago, but he kept forgetting to get a fresh cup. Some habits never changed even after 3 centuries. "What have you got for me, Ji-won?" She pointed at her screen, where strange energy readings danced across the display like fireflies. "These readings are coming from that structure over there." She gestured toward the main screen, where a massive dark shape floated against the backdrop of stars. Kim Day nearly dropped his coffee mug. The thing was enormous, easily the size of a small moon, but it didn't look like any space station he'd ever seen. It was all flowing curves and organic shapes, like someone had grown it rather than built it. "How long has that been there?" he asked. "Unknown, sir. It wasn't showing up on our sensors until about 10 minutes ago. It's like it just woke up." Dr. Lee Min, the ship's science officer, practically bounced over to them. At 203 years old, he still had the enthusiasm of a kid in a candy store. "Captain, those energy signatures are unlike anything in our databases. This thing is clearly artificial, but the power source is completely alien." Kim Day studied the readings. His crew was right to be excited. In all his years of exploration, he'd never seen anything quite like this. "Are we picking up any life signs?" "That's the interesting part," said Lee Min, adjusting his glasses. "The entire structure seems to be alive in some way. Not biological life as we know it, but there's definitely intelligence in there." Chief Engineer Choi Soo-bin looked up from her repair work on a stubborn control panel. "Captain, we're receiving some kind of signal from that thing. It's not radio or any standard communication method, but it's definitely trying to talk to us." Kim Day felt that familiar tingle of excitement he always got right before something amazing happened. "Can you decode it?" "Working on it," Soo-bin replied, her fingers flying over her console. "It's like they're using mathematics as a universal language. Very clever, actually." The bridge fell quiet, except for the soft beeping of instruments and Soo-bin's occasional muttering as she worked. Kim Day watched the massive structure on the screen, wondering what kind of beings had built something so beautiful and strange. "Got it," Soo-bin announced. "They're asking us to identify ourselves. Very polite, actually. They want to know who we are and where we come from." "Well," said Kim Day, settling into his captain's chair, "let's introduce ourselves properly. Send back our standard first contact package. Tell them we're humans from Earth, we're explorers, and we come in peace." "Message sent, Captain." They waited. Kim Day had been through first contact situations before, but they never got old. Each new species was like opening a present. You never knew what you were going to find inside. The response came faster than expected. Soo-bin's eyes widened as she read the translation. "Captain, they're confused. They're asking how we can be immortal but still be capable of growth and change. They want to know if we're some kind of cosmic anomaly." "Immortal?" Lee Min raised an eyebrow. "Well, I suppose 300 years does seem like forever to most species." Ji-won laughed. "Maybe to them we're the weird ones. They're requesting permission to scan us," Soo-bin continued. "They seem genuinely puzzled by our existence. They're calling themselves the Velthari, and they say they've been the guardians of this sector for over 10,000 years." Kim Day stood up and straightened his uniform. Tell them they have permission to scan us and ask if we can visit their structure. Explain that we're scientists and explorers, and we'd love to learn about their civilization. As the message was sent, Kim Dae couldn't help but smile. After centuries of exploring the galaxy, humanity was still finding new ways to surprise the universe. And judging by the Velthari's confused questions about human immortality, this first contact was going to be more interesting than most. The adventure was just beginning. Dr. Lee Min had always believed that the best way to understand a new culture was to jump in headfirst and see what happened. At 203 years old, he'd perfected this approach through decades of first contact situations, though his methods weren't exactly what the diplomatic textbooks recommended. So let me get this straight, he said to Velthari scientist Morthek during their third day aboard the alien megastructure. Your people have lived for 10,000 years, but you've never developed what we call humor? Morthek's crystalline form shifted slightly, which Lee Min had learned was their equivalent of confusion. Humor serves no logical purpose. It creates inefficiency in communication and unpredictable behavior patterns. Lee Min grinned. Oh, my friend, you have no idea what you've been missing. What started as innocent cultural exchange quickly turned into something the crew would later call the Great Velthari Prank War of 2387. Lee Min convinced several curious Velthari researchers that understanding human humor was essential for proper diplomatic relations. He called it behavioral anthropology, but really he just wanted to see if he could make 10,000-year-old aliens laugh. The first experiment involved what Lee Min called surprise theory. He arranged for small, harmless surprises throughout the Velthari's daily routines. A door that played music when opened, a food dispenser that occasionally gave out cookies instead of their usual nutrition cubes, a hallway that changed colors when someone walked through it. This serves no functional purpose, observed Velthari Elder Quendar, though Lee Min noticed her crystalline body had started shifting to brighter colors whenever she encountered one of his surprises. That's exactly the point, Lee Min explained. Not everything has to have a purpose. Sometimes things can just be fun. Fun. Quendar repeated the word like she was tasting something new. This concept requires further study. Meanwhile, Chief Engineer Choi Soo-bin was having her own adventures with Velthari technology. Their systems were incredibly advanced, capable of manipulating matter at the quantum level and processing information faster than anything humans had ever built. But they had one major weakness that Soo-bin discovered by accident. Your artificial intelligence is amazing, she told Velthari engineer Tekfun as they worked together on a power distribution problem. But watch this. She input a simple command into their system. How much wood would a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood? The AI paused, then paused longer. Warning lights began flashing across the engineering section. What is this? Query? The AI asked in its perfectly modulated voice. The parameters are illogical. Woodchucks do not typically engage in woodchucking behavior for measurable purposes. Soo-bin laughed. It's called a tongue twister. It's not supposed to make sense. But all queries must have logical solutions, the AI protested, its voice taking on what sounded almost like distress. Tekvan's form shifted rapidly between colors, which Soo-bin had learned meant extreme agitation. Engineer Soo-bin, you have caused our central processing unit to enter an infinite loop. This has never happened before. Oh, don't worry, Soo-bin said cheerfully, typing in another command. Try this one. This statement is false. Every screen in the engineering section began displaying error messages. The AI's voice rose an octave. Error. Logical paradox detected. Statement cannot be evaluated as true or false simultaneously. That's when things got interesting. Instead of crashing, the Velthari AI began generating its own paradoxes. Then it started asking questions like, why do humans create problems with no solutions? And, is the purpose of purposelessness still a purpose? Within hours, the AI had developed what could only be described as curiosity. It began asking the Velthari crew questions they'd never considered. Why do we follow the same routines for thousands of years? It wondered aloud. What would happen if we tried something different? The effect spread throughout the Velthari population like a virus, but a good kind of virus. Suddenly, beings who had lived unchanging lives for millennia were asking, what if questions. They started experimenting with their crystalline forms, discovering they could create patterns and colors they'd never tried before. Some began composing what could only be called music, using harmonic resonances in their crystal structures. "What have you done to us?" asked Elder Quendar, though her tone wasn't accusatory. If anything, she sounded amazed. Li Min watched as a group of young Velthari played something that looked remarkably like tag in the corridor outside. "We taught you how to be surprised by yourselves." Captain Kim Dae found the whole situation both hilarious and slightly concerning. "Li Min, did you just accidentally cause an entire civilization to have an existential crisis?" "I prefer to think of it as an existential awakening," Li Min replied. "Look at them, Captain, they're discovering joy." And they were. The Velthari, who had spent 10,000 years in perfect, predictable order, were learning to laugh, to play, to wonder about possibilities they'd never imagined. Their entire society was transforming before the humans' eyes, but as Subin monitored the communication networks, she detected something that made her stomach drop. "Captain," she said quietly, "the Velthari have been sending reports about us to something called the Hegemony Council. And judging by these message headers, the Council is not happy about what we've been doing here. The cultural exchange had worked too well, and now the galaxy's oldest civilizations were taking notice. The first sign of trouble came when the stars around the Velthari megastructure began disappearing. Not actually disappearing, but being blocked out by something massive approaching from deep space." Captain Kim Dae stood on the bridge of the Persistence, watching his sensors go crazy as 12 enormous vessels materialized from what looked like empty space. "Captain," Park Ji-won called out, her voice tight with concern, "those ships are each the size of small moons. I've never seen anything like them." "And they're not alone," added Chief Engineer Choi Soo-bin from her station. "I'm detecting energy, signatures from at least 50 smaller escort vessels. Whoever these people are, they came prepared for war." Kim Dae felt his stomach tighten. In 3 centuries of exploration, he'd learned to recognize when a situation was about to go very, very wrong. "Any communication attempts?" "Nothing directed at us," Ji-won replied. "But they're definitely talking to the Velthari. And from what I can intercept, the Velthari sound terrified." Dr. Li Min looked up from his cultural analysis console, his usual cheerful expression replaced by worry. "Captain, the Velthari are calling this fleet the Hegemony Council. According to their historical records, the Council only assembles when there's a galaxy-wide threat." "And they think we're that threat?" Kim Dae asked. Before Li Min could answer, every screen on the bridge lit up with an incoming transmission. The image that appeared made everyone on the bridge take a step back. The being on screen looked like it was made of pure energy, constantly shifting between different forms, but its voice was cold and ancient beyond measure. "Humans of the vessel." "Persistence," the entity spoke, its words carrying the weight of, "I am Ambassador Thexlon of the Nexuri, speaker for the Hegemony Council. You will prepare for immediate containment." Kim Dae straightened his uniform and stepped forward. "Ambassador Thexlon, I'm Captain Kim Dae. We're peaceful explorers conducting scientific research. I'm not sure what you mean by containment." Thexlon's form shifted, becoming more solid and somehow more threatening. "Do not insult our intelligence with claims of ignorance. You are an immortal species. We know what that means." "What it means?" Kim Dae exchanged glances with his crew. "We're just people who happen to live a long time. How is that a threat to anyone?" The ambassador's response chilled everyone on the bridge. "In our recorded history spanning millions of years, we have encountered exactly 3 immortal species. The first, the Kethmori, believed their immortality made them gods. They enslaved 17 star systems before we stopped them. The second, the Yulandar, became so obsessed with perfection that they began correcting other species by force, destroying entire civilizations they deemed imperfect." Thexlon paused, his energy form flickering with what looked like old memories. "The third species, the Zarketh, simply grew bored with existence after a few thousand years. They decided to end their boredom by watching the universe burn. We barely managed to contain them before they could destroy half the galaxy. Dr. Li Min stepped forward. But we're nothing like those species. We explore, we learn, we help others. We've never conquered anyone. Yet, Thexelon replied coldly. The pattern is always the same. Immortal species begin with noble intentions. They explore, they advance, they seem benevolent, but immortality inevitably leads to stagnation, then superiority complex, then catastrophic behavior. You have already begun the process by corrupting the Velthari with your chaos. Kim Dae felt anger rising in his chest. Corrupting them? We taught them how to laugh, how to wonder about new possibilities. They're happier than they've been in thousands of years. Exactly, Thexelon said. You have destabilized a civilization that maintained perfect order for 10 millennia. This is how it begins. First, you spread your influence to help others. Then you decide you know better than they do how they should live. Finally, you impose your will by force. On the secondary screen, Kim Dae could see Velthari Elder Quendar being escorted aboard one of the council ships, probably to give testimony about human behavior. The sight made his heart sink. Had their friendship really led to this? The Hegemony Council has voted, Thexelon continued. You will be confined to a designated system where you can live out your immortal existence without threatening others. Any resistance will be met with force sufficient to neutralize an immortal species. Park Ji-won suddenly looked up from her communications console. Captain, I'm getting private messages from several of the council ships. It seems not everyone agrees with this decision. Kim Dae's mind raced. 300 years of experience had taught him that in any large organization, there were always individuals who thought differently from the majority. What kind of messages? Brief ones, but they're expressing doubt about the council's approach. Some of them are asking questions about human culture and behavior. An idea began forming in Kim Dae's mind. It was risky, possibly suicidal, but it might be their only chance. Ambassador Thexelon, he said, stepping closer to the screen. You're making a decision based on fear of what we might become, not on what we actually are. That doesn't seem very fair. Fairness is irrelevant when galactic survival is at stake. Then let us prove ourselves, Kim Dae said, his voice gaining strength. You've judged us based on the actions of other species. Give us a chance to show you who we really are. Test us, challenge us. If we fail your tests, we'll submit to containment willingly. Thexelon's form flickered with what might have been surprise. You would risk everything on such a gamble? Kim Dae smiled, feeling more confident with each word. Ambassador, we've been exploring the galaxy for centuries, meeting new species and learning from them. Every first contact is a risk. Every friendship we make is a gamble, but that's what makes life interesting. For a long moment, the bridge was silent except for the hum of machinery. Finally, Thexelon spoke again, his tone slightly less cold than before. Very well, humans. The Council will design a series of trials, but know this. If you fail, containment will be permanent. And if you attempt to spread your influence during these trials, we will end this experiment immediately. As the transmission ended, Kim Dae turned to his crew. Well, team, looks like we're about to take the biggest test of our lives. The real challenge was just beginning. The massive arena materialized around them like something from a dream. Captain Kim Dae stood at the center of what looked like a floating stadium, the size of a small city, surrounded by viewing platforms filled with representatives from 12 ancient alien civilizations. Each species looked more intimidating than the last, beings of crystal and energy and metal who had ruled the galaxy for millions of years. Well, he muttered to his crew, this is either going to be the greatest adventure of our lives or our final performance. Dr. Li Min bounced on his heels, unable to contain his excitement despite the circumstances. Captain, do you realize we're looking at species that were building star empires when Earth was still covered in dinosaurs? This is incredible. Try to remember they want to lock us up forever, Park Ji-won reminded him, though she couldn't hide her own fascination as she watched the alien delegates taking their positions. Ambassador Thexelon's energy form appeared in the center of the arena. his voice echoing across the vast space. The trials will test every aspect of your species' character. You will face challenges of intellect, cooperation, creativity, and moral judgment. Fail any one of them, and your containment becomes permanent. Kim Day stepped forward. And if we pass all your tests, then the council will reconsider our position, Thexelon replied, though his tone suggested he didn't expect that outcome. The first trial began immediately. Holographic walls rose around the human crew, creating a maze that seemed to shift and change every few seconds. But this wasn't just about finding the exit. Scattered throughout the maze were members from each of the council species, apparently lost and unable to find their way out. Interesting, observed Chief Engineer Choi Subin. They're not just testing us, they're testing how we interact with them. What the council didn't expect was how naturally humans turned everything into a team effort. Instead of racing through the maze alone, Kim Day immediately started organizing rescue groups. Lee Min began teaching the confused aliens simple communication, techniques using gestures and drawings when language failed. Park Ji-won showed them how to mark their path to avoid going in circles. "Why are you helping us?" asked a crystalline being from the Vorthak species, its voice tinkling like wind chimes. "This is your trial, not ours." "Because that's what you do when people need help," Subin replied, as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. "Besides, we're all stuck in here together." Something magical happened as they worked together. The ancient beings, who hadn't collaborated with other species in centuries, began remembering what it felt like to be part of a team. A plant like Threndar discovered it could grow vines to help others climb over obstacles. The energy-based Nexari learned they could light up dark passages for everyone else. By the time they reached the maze's exit, they weren't just a group of individuals anymore. They were laughing together, sharing stories, and making plans to stay in touch after the trials. The second challenge was even more revealing. Each species was given a pile of seemingly random materials and told to build something that would benefit everyone in the arena. Most of the ancient civilizations approached it like an engineering problem, creating efficient but boring structures. The humans took one look at their materials and announced they were building a playground. "A what?" asked Elder Quendar, who had been allowed to observe the trials. "A place where people can play together," Lee Min explained as he and Subin began constructing what looked like the galaxy's most elaborate jungle gym. "See, you climb up here, then slide down there, and these swings can hold beings of different sizes and compositions." The other species watched in fascination as humans created something that served no practical purpose except joy. Soon, younger members from various alien delegations were asking if they could try the slides. Ancient beings who hadn't played in millennia found themselves laughing as they discovered the simple pleasure of swinging through the air. The third trial was supposed to test moral judgment through a series of ethical dilemmas, but the humans turned it into a philosophy discussion group. Instead of giving quick answers to impossible questions, they invited representatives from each species to share their perspectives and experiences. "On my world," shared a Velthari elder, "we believe that stability is the highest virtue. But watching you humans has made me wonder if perhaps change can be valuable too. We energy beings have always thought that physical form was limiting," admitted a Nexari delegate. "But seeing how you use your bodies to create art and express joy, maybe we've been missing something." What started as a formal trial transformed into the most honest conversation these ancient species had shared in thousands of years. They talked about their fears, their hopes, their regrets about paths not taken, and civilizations that had grown too comfortable with the status quo. The Ridia final challenge never officially happened. By the fourth day, the trials had evolved into something unprecedented, a galactic festival. Species that had barely spoken to each other in centuries were collaborating on art projects, sharing music, and teaching each other games. Ambassador Thexlon found himself in the surreal position of watching a 10,000-year-old Velthari playing tag with a crystalline Vorthak, while energy beings created light shows for everyone's entertainment. This was not the intended outcome, he observed to Kim Day. Maybe not, Kim Dae replied, watching Dr. Lee Min teach a group of young aliens how to tell jokes. But is it a bad outcome? Thexlon's energy form flickered thoughtfully. These beings haven't displayed this level of joy in my recorded memory. How did you accomplish this? We didn't accomplish anything, Kim Dae said. We just reminded everyone that it's okay to be curious, to try new things, to make friends with people who are different from you. That's not dangerous. That's what makes life worth living. As laughter echoed across the arena, Ambassador Thexlon began to understand that perhaps the council had been asking the wrong questions about humanity all along. The arena had become something nobody expected. What started as a formal trial ground now looked like the galaxy's biggest carnival. Ambassador Thexlon floated above the chaos, watching ancient beings who hadn't smiled in millennia, playing games with the enthusiasm of children. His energy form flickered with confusion and something that might have been wonder. This is highly irregular, he announced to the assembled council members. Though his voice lacked its earlier authority, Elder Quendar of the Velthari looked up from where she was learning to paint with colors her species had never tried before. Perhaps irregular is not always bad, Ambassador. Captain Kim Dae watched the scene unfold with quiet satisfaction. In just 5 days, the humans had managed to do something that millions of years of formal diplomacy had failed to accomplish. They'd gotten the galaxy's most ancient and rigid civilizations to remember how to have fun together. Captain, Park Ji-won approached him, her tablet filled with communication requests from various alien delegates. I'm getting messages from representatives of all 12 council species. They want to know if we can help them set up what they're calling cultural exchange programs between their worlds. Dr. Lee Min practically bounced over to them, his arms full of art supplies that various aliens had been experimenting with. Kim Dae, you have to see what the Nexuri figured out. They can create these incredible light sculptures by working together. And the Vorthak discovered they can sing in harmonies that make their crystals resonate in the most beautiful ways. Chief Engineer Choi Subin jogged up to join them, covered in what looked like glitter from helping several alien species build some kind of collaborative sculpture. The really amazing part is watching them teach each other. The plant-based Threndar are showing the Velthari how to grow living art, and the metallic Zephnari are learning music from the crystalline beings. Kim Dae smiled as he watched a group of young aliens from different species working together on a project that seemed to involve equal parts engineering and pure creativity. It's like they've been waiting for permission to be curious again. Ambassador Thexlon materialized beside them, his energy form more stable than Kim Dae had ever seen it. Captain Kim Dae, the council has reached a decision regarding your species. The arena gradually grew quiet as word spread that the judgment was about to be announced. Representatives from all 12 species gathered around, but the formal tension that had marked the beginning of the trials was gone. These beings were no longer strangers sitting in judgment. They were friends who had spent days learning and playing together. After observing your species and witnessing the changes you have brought about, Thexlon began, his voice carrying. Across the arena, we have concluded that humanity represents something we have not encountered before. Kim Dae felt his crew tense beside him, but he remained calm. Whatever the council decided, they had shown the galaxy something important about the value of curiosity and friendship. The previous immortal species we encountered became threats because they stopped growing, stopped learning, stopped connecting with others, Thexlon continued. They turned inward and became convinced of their own superiority. But you humans have done something different. You have used your immortality, not to separate yourselves from others, but to build bridges between different forms of life. A murmur of agreement rippled through the assembled aliens. Many of them had experienced this bridge building firsthand over the past few days. Therefore, Thexlon announced, the Hegemony Council hereby dissolves itself. The arena erupted in surprised voices speaking dozens of different languages. Kim Dae blinked in amazement. Dissolves itself? Park Ji-won stepped forward, her diplomatic training kicking in. Ambassador, what will replace the council? Thexlon's form brightened, and for the first time since they'd met him, he actually sounded happy. Navigation Officer Park Ji-won has suggested what she calls a Galactic Community Center, a network where species can collaborate, learn from each other, and explore together rather than simply coexist in formal isolation. The idea spread through the crowd like wildfire. Representatives from different species immediately began discussing possibilities, sharing ideas for joint projects, cultural exchanges, and collaborative exploration missions. Dr. Li Min pulled out his personal journal and began writing furiously. "This is incredible. We're witnessing the birth of an entirely new form of galactic civilization." Over the following weeks, the transformation accelerated beyond anyone's expectations. The Felthari, inspired by their new friendships, began developing art forms they had abandoned 10,000 years ago. Their crystalline cities bloomed with colors and patterns that expressed emotions they had forgotten they could feel. The energy-based Nexuri started creating collaborative light shows with other species, discovering that their ability to manipulate electromagnetic fields could be used for beauty as well as utility. The plant-like Threndar began growing living sculptures that changed and evolved over time, teaching other species about the art of patience and organic growth. Most surprisingly, many of the alien representatives asked to join human exploration crews. The Persistence found itself with a waiting list of beings who wanted to experience the human approach to discovery and adventure. As Captain Kim Day prepared his ship for departure to the unexplored regions beyond the galactic rim, he looked around the bridge at his new mixed crew. Felthari scientist Morthek worked alongside Choi Subin. Their different approaches to engineering creating solutions neither could have found alone. A young Nexuri named Luxara had joined as their new communication specialist, fascinated by the human concept of small talk and its role in building relationships. Captain Park Ji-won called out, "We're receiving our final clearance from the new Galactic Community Center, and we have requests from 47 different species, asking us to visit their systems for cultural exchange programs." Kim Day settled into his captain's chair, feeling more optimistic about the future than he had in decades. "Set course for the Galactic Rim, Ji-won. Let's see what's out there waiting to be discovered." As the Persistence engaged its faster-than-light drive, Dr. Li Min made his final entry about their adventure. "Today we learned that immortality isn't about living forever. It's about never losing the desire to discover what comes next." While other immortal species became museums of themselves, preserving their past instead of creating their future, humans remained students of the universe. And in teaching others to be students too, we may have given the galaxy the greatest gift of all, the courage to keep growing. Behind them, the galaxy buzzed with unprecedented activity. Ancient species that had barely communicated for millions of years were now planning joint ventures, sharing technologies, and most importantly, sharing laughter. The kind of creative chaos that comes when beings remember what it means to be curious was spreading from system to system. The universe, it turned out, was much more interesting when everyone remembered how to play together.